taking air out of the lungs. And that is done by the same system, the respiratory system. Also, the just taking air into the lungs and then passing it into the blood is called ventilation. So you have to be very familiar to these terms because they can be confusing if you don't learn them and distinguish them so that you don't confuse them. Because they will ask you the test, they can use this and the other one to avoid. So and sometimes they try to confuse you because in the test they put some tricks. They are just testing. That's why we call it a test. They test if you really know it, if you have mastered it. So you have to know those terminologies very well. And that is the problem in biology because there are so many terms that you have to learn within a short time. And they expect you to memorize them, understand them at the same time. Okay, so now we know the main function of the respiratory system. So what we are going to look at next is the organs of the respiratory system. Any system is made up of organs. The organs are made up of tissues, and tissues are made up of cells. So all the system work together to make your whole being, which is organism. So you are an organism. I'm an organism. All of us are organisms. Plants are organisms. So plants also have their systems and their organs and their tissues and their cells. So that in biology one. So you have to know which ones are the organs of the respiratory system. Now these organs are in this picture here because some of them internally you cannot see them, but it gives you the picture of where they are in your body. Now this is only the respiratory system. You see, it begins from the nose and then it goes all the way on through down here. This is the bottom, the end. This is the destination of the system. And that is at the bottom of your lungs. So it begins from the nose and ends up at the bottom of the lungs. Now at the bottom of the lungs we have some spaces called air sacs. Air sacs are like air bags. They're small bags, microscopic. Now this is where exchange of the gases take place. Now the air is composed of several gases. So we have the main ones are carbon dioxide and oxygen. We have some other gases, they call them the rare gases. They are not so important, except nitrogen. We could say nitrogen is after the two, but the rest are rare gases which are not very active. They are not chemically reactive. So we call them inert gases. Inert is spelled as I-N-E-R-T, inert. That means they are not reactive. They don't react.
Which ones are those?
Pardon?
What are the inert gases?
Well, they don't expect you to know that, but if you're a chemistry student, then you have to know. They're called, the examples of the inert gases are neon, argon, and well, those are two of the most common ones, like about 3, 4. Okay, so here, what I want you to see here is the two important gases, which are carbon dioxide and oxygen. Now, always in every system, we have to come back to this chemical reaction, which is the cellular respiration, this side, and this side is photosynthesis. And this side photosynthesis occurs in plants. The cellular respiration occurs in the animal cells, within the cells. So we as animals, we have the cellular respiration occurring within all of our cells, all the tissues. Now here you have a picture of a cell. Now you see, as we know from biology 1, what is the definition of a cell? Basic unit of life. Basic unit of life. So the life is made up of cells as the bottom, the foundation. Then the cells make up tissues, and tissues make up organs, and organs make up systems. So every cell has this reaction. That's why we call it cellular reaction. So the carbon dioxide is produced here within the cytoplasm of the cell, while oxygen comes in with glucose. And that's what you see here. So glucose is C6H12O6 and oxygen is O2. So we have these two molecules. The first one has only 3 elements, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And oxygen molecule is just one element, only oxygen, nothing else. So these two molecules will react chemically to produce these products on this other end, which is photosynthesis on the reverse end. So you get products as carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Now, energy is the most important product which the body needs for energy, because everything that we do requires energy. And then carbon dioxide and water are water here is excess water. Our body is made up of water. 80% is water. Blood is 80% water. But even the tissues are water. They have water. So water is very important in the body. But if the body can only take a certain amount of water, if you give it more, the extra water is excess, so it is a waste. So this water which is produced by the reaction is extra. So it is a waste that has to be removed out of the body. So how is it removed? From the cells, it will come out, and then the cells of the body are surrounded by blood vessels. The smallest blood vessels we learned in chapter 12, the capillaries. So the capillaries will take up that water, bring it to the heart, to pump it to the lungs, and you breathe it out. Sorry, pump it to the kidneys and you pee it out. While the carbon dioxide will come to the lungs and you breathe it out. That is how you get rid of these products of cellular respiration. But as you take them out, carbon dioxide is needed by the plants, and plants need water also for photosynthesis. So it is mutual relationship between plants and animals. Okay, so this is what happens in the respiration. Now, the air which is taken into the lungs okay, so we need to know the pathway that air takes from the time it enters the nostrils up to the bottom of your lungs. So that is through all the organs. These are the organs of the respiratory system that we need to know. So the nose is the first organ. Then after the air is passed through the nose, it is through the two openings which are called nares. Nares is a technical term, but we call them also nostrils. Now, the nostrils are two here, but if you move ahead along the two tubes, they join into one single tube channel. And that is what they call the nasal cavity. This one here, the nasal cavity. So the nasal cavity will continue to this, which is the pharynx. The pharynx is the road junction, because that is where the tubes divide into two. One goes to the lungs and the other one goes to the digestive system, which is the esophagus. The esophagus goes to the stomach, then to the intestines, and then out of the body through the rectum. And then the other tube is the trachea. And the trachea will come all the way down here, but there is part of it here which is a enlarged part, which is called the larynx. Now, larynx is the technical term, but we call it in ordinary terms the voice box. The voice box means it has something to do with the voice, sound. So this tube is made up of cartilage. The whole tube, from the pharynx all the way down to the bottom of the lungs, is a tube which is open. It is open all the times. It is not like the esophagus which closes. Because the esophagus wall is made up of smooth muscle. But the trachea wall is made up of cartilage. There are cartilage rings. So it is, cartilage is rigid. So it doesn't close like the esophagus, which is smooth muscle, soft. So it is open all the time. And that is an advantage which helps it to perform that function of allowing air to flow in and out freely without resistance. So that is how the air moves through the respiratory pathway. Now, the other term for respiratory pathway is called the respiratory tract. You have to know all these terms as they come in because they expect you to memorize them, put them in your memory, store them in your brain. That's why we give you the quiz after the lecture. So you take the notes and at the same time try to remember them. So respiratory pathway is also called respiratory tract. Tract is a path. A path like digestive tract is the path, the tube that food passes through from the time you take it into your mouth when it comes out of your body through the rectum. It's a whole tube all the way through. But this one is another tube, another pathway, another tract. Digestive tract is the respiratory tract. So the respiratory tract goes from nose to nasal cavity to the pharynx, and then it comes here to the voice box, which is the larynx. And you can read those spellings. I think it is readable even for those people at the back. Okay, that's the best I can make it. So, the voice box, since it is made up of cartilage, cartilage is not soft, but it is not hard like a bone. It is not soft like the skin or muscle, but it is not as hard as a bone. So it's in between there. It is like plastic. It's rigid but flexible. It can bend like this. Now the cartilage makes up our ears. So you see, you can fold it like this, and when you let your fingers go, it goes back. So it is flexible. It forms the nose. It's made up of cartilage. And the cartilage makes even the tissue between the bones and the joints, so that the bones don't run against each other and cause friction. That's why your movements are smooth. You don't feel anything, just move normally. Otherwise, it could be very difficult to move because the bones could be rubbing against each other. So it is to reduce friction, to allow smooth, easy movements. But because it is soft, but it can still vibrate. So when air passes through the tube, it vibrates, especially at the pharynx, at the larynx, which is the voice box. And that is what produces sound. Now, when air vibrates, it produces energy, which is the sound. That's why you hear me talking now, because I use my voice box, the larynx, to make the air which passes in there vibrate and produce sound. Now, if you play instruments, like musical instruments, you blow air into the tube, like a flute, or a saxophone, or a trumpet. That air vibrates within the tube and produces sound. That's why you can even produce sound with any tube. You can even make your hands into a tube and blow air and you will produce sound. With that alone, you need try. I'm making sound because I put both my hands like that, and then the opening, because they make a tube inside, and I blow air through it to produce sound. So that is what the larynx is for. It helps us to speak. If you get respiratory tract infection, the infection damages the tissue and then it swells. And when it swells, it cannot vibrate. That's why people lose their voices when they get infection of the throat. Okay, so now that's all about the larynx, the voice box. What about this tube down here? You can see that it is made up of rings. So the tube is a series of rings of cartilage. That is keeping it open like a hose pipe. You see, if you have a rigid hose pipe, you can use it to sprinkle water or wash your vehicle or wash your walls or water, because it passes water with force. So the trachea has those rings, cartilage rings, which makes it open all the time so air can flow in and out. So the cartilage also is, the trachea is also called windpipe. The street people, ordinary people call it windpipe, but we know it as trachea. So trachea means windpipe means trachea. So look, why am I telling you this? Because they want you to know both. They want you to know the technical term and the common layman's term. In the test, they can use any of the two. If you know only one and you don't know the other one, you're lost. You can use that question. So you have to know both. So then the trachea, which is the windpipe, divides as it comes down into the lungs, into the chest. It divides into two branches. You can see these two branches like a fork. Now, those two branches have a different name. We don't call it trachea anymore, but we call each one of them a bronchus. It is spelled here. Bronchus is one, but if there are two of them plural, it's bronchi. So don't say bronchuses, you say bronchi. So these are the bronchi. This is the right, this is the left, and this is the right bronchi. See, these two branches. Probably it is not labeled in this diagram, but in your book it is there. Those who are the textbook. So you have to know it, and you have to have it in your note. I'll ask you these things in a quiz in a few minutes, so you have to remember this. What? Pardon? Yeah, no, I'm not giving you any more, because since last semester I told you to buy your books. If you don't want to buy your books, I don't give them anymore, because I lose them. Okay, so the bronchi also, as they move along forward, they divide into smaller branches. As you can see here, the bronchi are branches of the trachea. They are smaller than the trachea. But when they divide into more branches, those branches are smaller than the bronchi. So we don't call them bronchi anymore. We call them bronchioles. Bronchioles. So bronchioles are smaller branches of the bronchi. Bronchi are smaller branches of the trachea. So they keep dividing into smaller and smaller and smaller branches until, you see, you can barely see them. So the bronchioles divide into the smallest ones, the smallest branches, which are called bronchial sacs. Bronchial sacs. Then the bronchial sacs, that is the dead end. That's where the respiratory tract ends. And it ends, each one ends in a bar, in a tube, like a small pocket, which is called the alveolus. Now, since it is so small you cannot see it with your naked eyes, they have magnified it here. That's how you can see it under the microscope. So you see, they look like a cluster of grapes, like a bunch of grapes. See, so many of them all together like marbles. These ones. All these are alveoli. It is spelled here. So make sure you remember the spelling also, because you're going to write the answers. So you have to spell it correctly. So what is the function of the bronchial sacs? This is where the air sits as a resting stage before it gets into the blood. So the air sacs, or the alveoli, have a main function for gaseous exchange. What do you mean by gaseous exchange? That's where the two most important gases get exchanged, the carbon dioxide and oxygen. Oxygen gets into the blood. Carbon dioxide from the blood comes out and you breathe it out. So every time you breathe in, taking oxygen to your lungs, to the blood. Every time you breathe out, you take out carbon dioxide from the body to the atmosphere. That is what we call gaseous exchange. So you have to understand these things very well, clearly, so that you can also try to remember them. That is the learning process. If you have to put your mind there, when you pay attention, and then try to remember it, and can be able to write it, and you've learned it. So that's what you're here for. So now we have reached the bottom line. That is the end of the respiratory system. So if I ask you what is the end of the respiratory system, it is the air saccule alveoli. What is the function of the alveoli? Gaseous exchange. And so far we have only gone through the path from the beginning to the end of the path, or the tract. And now we know all those organs. But that is not all about the respiratory system, because we have some that outside the pathway, they strip the pathway from beginning to end. For example, the lungs, which contains everything here, is another organ. So we need to know about the lungs also. Now, there are two lungs, right lung and left lung. Now, you need to know more about the structure of the lung. The lung is triangular. You can see each lung has three sides. They are not perfect triangles, but they are more like a triangle. That's why we call it triangular. So you can see we have one side here for this lung, this is the left lung, one side here, another side here, and then another one here. So there are three sides, 1, 2, 3, and that's a triangle. A triangle has three sides. That's why we call it triangular shape. So you have to know the shape of the lung. Now, then, what more can you see on the lung? Now, you need to know the sides have specific names. We don't just call them all the sides, but we want to give them scientific names, which is especially for biology students. The ordinary people call it just a lung, and that's all they know. You're not ordinary. When you take biology, you become a specialist, you become a scientist. So you use a different language. So we call these sides, this one is called a border, and this is the left border. For this one, this is the right border. And then we have this at the bottom is called the base. And then this pointed tip here is called the apex. So remember those, the border, the base, and the apex. Apex is spelled as A-P-E-X. The border, just like a border, like Texas-Mexican border, or US-Mexican border, Canadian-US border. So, then we have each lung, as you see it as a whole, is divided into compartments, divisions. Just like in your kitchen, you have all those compartments, chambers, and you can keep different types of utensils or whatever in each compartment. So the lung has these divisions. Now these divisions are called lobes. Lobes is spelled as L-O-B-E, lobes. If they are plural, lobes, S. Okay, so the left lung has 2 lobes. So you have to remember that number 2, because the right is different. And the right lung has 3 lobes. Now, there is a reason for that, which is important for you to know. Why does the left has only 2 lungs, but the right has 3 lobes? The left lung has 2 lobes because the heart is between the lungs. So the heart is found somewhere here. So the heart also is not a very big organ, but it needs a space. So it needs a space. That space is created by the lung sacrificing one lobe. So instead of having 3, just have 2 to give space for the heart. That's the reason. Because most of the heart is on the left. As we saw in cardiovascular system, we saw it in the lung already when we did that dissected as specimen. But then the right has more space, so can accommodate 3 lobes. Okay, now, then finally we have another organ here, which is not so visible in that diagram, but I can pick up another diagram and you can see. And that one is, okay, now let us look at it in this other diagram. The good thing with Google is that they have so many diagrams that you can exchange, pick up whichever suits your need. So this is the diaphragm. This is the diaphragm. And this one is now you can read because the letters are big, you can see all the labels. It's very important that you know all those parts and spelling of all the organs we have covered. Because in a few minutes you'll be having a test to test what you have learned. Okay, so this is the diaphragm. Now diaphragm is a muscle. It's a smooth muscle. We have 3 types of muscles. We have skeletal muscles, smooth muscles, and cardiac muscles. We learned that already in chapter 12. The cardiac muscle is found only in the heart. The smooth muscle is found internally. Most of these organs are tubular. They are tubes, like the esophagus, like the intestines, and the tubes, like in females, the fallopian tubes, and the urinary system. We have the ureter and the urethra. All these are tubes, and the blood vessels are tubes. But all of them, their walls are made up of smooth muscles. Smooth muscles also make organs that are storage organs. They're like bags within your body, like the stomach, which stores food, like the urinary bladder, which stores urine, like the gallbladder, which stores bile. All these are made up of smooth muscle in their walls. Now, we have smooth muscle here, but here it is not a tube, not a bag. It's a unique one because of its function. It is called the diaphragm. That's the spelling. Now, the diaphragm separates the chest, the thorax, because here up is the thorax, that's your chest, and here down is your belly, the abdomen. So the border between those 2 compartments is the diaphragm. So it serves that purpose to separate these 2 compartments because they contain different organs, different functions, different systems. But in the respiratory system, the diaphragm is so important for something more than that, because it is the one that allows us to breathe in and out. And that is called the mechanism of breathing. The mechanism of breathing, that is how breathing is made possible, is through the diaphragm. Because being a muscle, it can contract and relax. Now look, that is why we have movements of the limbs, because the skeletal muscles are attached to the bones. Like this one, you see this muscle? This is the biceps, this is the triceps. Now it's a long muscle from here to your elbow. It is attached to the joint here. So when you do like that, it contracts, it's shortened. Because I bend it, it's shortened, and then it pulls this bone up here. But when it relaxes, it pushes the bone this way. So it causes bending and stretching by contracting and relaxing. That's how muscles work. We learned that already. That is a review because it's very important for you to understand this. So when muscles contract, they pull then become shorter. But when they relax, they become longer. That's how they work. So this being a muscle, and a smooth muscle, it is contained within the compartment. You see, this is a restricted portion, a restricted area, because it's only up to this. If it relaxes, it can not go outside. It is composed there. So if it becomes longer when relaxing, it can only bend upward like this. And when it shortens, it can only come flat like this. So the diaphragm moves like this, like a dome shape when it relaxes, and when it contracts, it goes flat. So when it moves as a dome shape, it pushes air which is in the chest here up. And that air will find its way out through your nose and out. That's how you breathe out, which is called expiration or exhalation. That's the mechanism of breathing. When it goes down flat, it allows more space in the chest cavity. So when it allows more space, that means the volume increases. When the volume increases, like you have more volume here, then the pressure decreases. So the pressure within here will decrease. So the pressure in the chest will be less than the pressure outside, and the air moves from high pressure to low pressure. So when that happens, then the air will move from the atmosphere, from outside your body, into your lungs. And the reverse happens. When it relaxes, it pushes this up, so it reduces the volume here. When the volume reduces, the pressure increases. Volume and pressure, they go the reverse way every time. So if the pressure now increases inside here more than the pressure outside, then the air will be pushed out. That is how you breathe in and out, through the help of the diaphragm. Now, this is not something you can read and understand quickly like that. It needs explanation and systematic explanation, like the way I deal with you, you understand. If you don't understand it, I can repeat it, because this is very, very important, because this is what allows breathing in and out. If this muscle becomes paralyzed, you die, because you stop breathing. And if you stop breathing, your lungs stop working, your heart stops, then your brain stops, then you die. The last one to stop is your brain. Because if your brain stops working, you become unconscious. You don't think, you don't feel, you don't know where you are. So you collapse, you fall down. You can not even contain yourself. You cannot maintain a posture. You collapse, you get into a shock, get into a coma, and you die. So that is what supports life. So that completes almost this part of the respiratory system. We have covered the whole system. We know the main function of the system. We know the beginning of the system and the end. We know all the organs from beginning to the end in order, in sequence, from the nose to the bottom of the lungs, from the nares, the nostrils, to the alveoli, the air sacs at the bottom of the lungs. And we know the function of each. We know the function of these tubes. They allow air to get into your lungs through the nasal cavity, then through the pharynx, then through the larynx, then through the trachea, then through the bronchi, then through the bronchioles and bronchial sac and alveoli. And we already covered the structure of the lung, the anatomy of the lung. The lung has there are two lungs, but each lung is divided into lobes, which are the compartments. And remember that the left has only 2 lobes, and the right has 3 lobes. There is a picture which shows these lobes. I don't think this one shows it, but that will be the last one we shall see. Then we take the quiz. So let us see which one has the lobes clear. Okay, let us look at this one. Okay, look at this. Look at this is the left line. You see, there is this line here which divides this and that. So these are two lobes. This is one lobe, and this is the second lobe. And then if you go to the right one, you see this line here and another line here. That divides into three lobes. This is the top. This lobe is called the superior lobe. Superior means upper. And this at the bottom is inferior lobe. Inferior means down, lower. And then the middle one is just called the middle lobe. They are all labeled in this diagram. You can see superior lobe, middle lobe, inferior lobe. The diagram is labeled here. And then we have the cardiac the cardiac notch. Notch means a space. That is the space which is left for the heart. The cardiac, look at my arrow on the screen here. So the heart occupies this space right here. And that's why we have only two lobes. Okay, so I think that is all for today. Now you can see the alveoli here. You can see a bunch of grapes, like a cluster of grapes, and those are air sacs. And you see they come at the end of the alveolar sacs. The bronchial sac is this one, which divides into two, and that's the last division of the system. And then it ends up into all these air sacs. Now the air sacs are in millions. They're showing you only a few, for example. But they have to be so many because that is the way they can give the whole body enough oxygen and also take out carbon dioxide. Okay, I think that's all for today. And I've reviewed it again